is the 19th of December, 2021, from Columbus, Ohio, and we're looking at Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, Karma Yoga, text 13. This is a verse that Srila Prabhupada often quotes, and it's certainly a very key and important verse in the practice of Bhakti Yoga. So I'll chant and then please stay on mute, but you can also respond. So Yagna Shishtashina Santo Muchante Sarvakil Bishai Munjate Te Tragam Papa Ye Pachantyat Makaranat. And the whole thing. Yagyashishtasina Santo Muchante Sarvakil Bishai Bunjate Te Twagam Papa Ye Pachantyat Makaranat. Yagya Shishta, of food taken after performance of yagya. Ashina, eaters. Santaha, the devotees. Muchante, get relief. Sarva, all kinds of. Kilbishai, from sins. Bunjate, enjoy. Te, they, too, but. Agam, grievous sins. Papa, sinners. Ye, who. Pachanti, prepare food. Atma karanat, for sense enjoyment. Srila Prabhupada's translation. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The devotees of the Supreme Lord, or the persons who are in Krishna consciousness, are called santas. And they are always in love with the Lord, as described in the Brahma Samhita 5:38, Prevanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti. The santas, being always in a compact of love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead Govinda, the giver of all pleasures, or Mukunda, the giver of liberation, or Krishna, the all-attractive person, cannot accept anything without first offering it to the Supreme Person. Therefore, such devotees always perform yagyas in different modes of devotional service, such as Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Archanam, Srimad Bhagavatam 7:5-23. That's a statement from Prahlad Maharaj, etc. And these performances of yagyas keep them always aloof from all kinds of contamination of sinful association in the material world. Others who prepare food for self or sense gratification are not only thieves, but also the eaters of all kinds of sins. How can a person be happy if he's both a thief and sinful? It is not possible. Therefore, in order for people to become happy in all respects, they must be taught to perform the easy process of Sankirtan Yagya in full Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, there can be no peace or happiness in the world. Yagya Shistastina Santo, Muchante Sarvikil Bishai, Bunjate Te Tukam Papa, Ye Prachantyat Vakarana. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which has been offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. So you'll notice here that the devotees are called Santa. Well, in Sanskrit, it's pronounced Santa. But there's actually, it's interesting because the linguists haven't been able to find any direct historical link between the Sanskrit word Santa and the English word saint, although Santa in Spanish means saint, like you have Santa Barbara, it means Saint Barbara. So that's interesting. And in Sanskrit, from what I could research, the Santa is related to the word Sat, which means truth or good or what's right, what's real, what's eternal. So those who are absorbed in what is true, what is right, what is good, what is eternal, And I thought it also interesting, especially here in America, people are absorbed in Christmas. And Prabhupada's talking about peace and happiness in the world. So to engage in peace and happiness in the world by being a proper Santa, by being a proper Santa. So how is it that the persons who are in line with truth are engaged in connection with Krishna, in connection with the truth through their eating? So how does a person who's in connected with truth, who's connected with reality, connected with the eternal, how do they eat? What is their process of eating that exemplifies being in touch with truth? So I give this analogy all the time, but because I just think it's such a simple thing to grasp, that I'm in a room that has one door and two windows and four walls. So the ingress and egress is through the door, not through the windows, although I'm on the first floor, so it wouldn't be too difficult. But if I were on the fourth floor or the 10th floor, to try to go in or out the room through the window might be pretty catastrophic. To go in or out through the wall, it just wouldn't work. I would get badly bruised. And so this is just the truth of this room, is that the ingress and egress is through the door. And it's not that the person who designed this room, or an architect, I don't think we had an actual architect for this room, but if there was one, and the builder, it's not that they thought, oh, let me build walls to give people bruises on their foreheads. Now, it is a fact that according to the law of karma, that there are sometimes punishments or rewards for things that are or are not in keeping with truth. We have examples of heavenly and hellish planets where there are specific rewards and punishments, temporary ones. But in general, the fact is that if we act in according with reality, we get peace and happiness, as Srila Prabhupada says in this purport. And if we don't act in accordance with reality, we suffer. And that's, again, not because there's an angry and vindictive God, but just because practically by definition, that's what truth means, right? Like instead of drinking I've got some lovely herbal tea here. Instead of that, if I would try to eat the cup, then I would break my teeth and I would damage my jaw. And that's not because, again, the cup designer is evil, but because the design of the cup is to hold liquids, not to be a food. I mean, I think there's someone in the Guinness Book of World Records who's eaten an airplane bit by bit, but that's not the way that our bodies are supposed to function. Yeah? We have certain things that we're supposed to be eating and certain things we're not supposed to be eating. And if we eat things that are not in accord with our physiological, biological makeup, then we suffer. Just like I'm here in Hillsborough, North Carolina, and we first came here in 1990. Pretty much there's always cats on this property. They belong to someone, or they belonged to somebody in the past, or they were they're kind of half feral or whatever. We always seem to have cats. And cats physiologically have to eat animals. They have to eat meat. If you try to make a cat a vegetarian, it will get sick and die, although you can make a dog a vegetarian. So there are certain things that are in accord with us and certain things that are not. My body has to breathe oxygen, for example, and I can't breathe oxygen in water like a fish can. So someone who's in accord with truth does things that comport with reality. I really like it that Srila Prabhupada will use laws of nature and laws of God interchangeably, that we can understand something about what God wants by looking at how he has structured reality. And also one of my favorite parts in the Bhagavatam is the beginning of the 7th canto, when it's asked, is God partial? Because it seems like that. You know, I have better health than some people, and other people have better health than I have. And I have, other people are uglier than I am, or more beautiful than I am, or they have less money than I have, or more money than I have, or less education or more education. So why is this uneven? Is God partial? Is he just saying, okay, you get lots of health and you get a happy family and you don't? And the answer is God is not partial. But the more we're in accord with sattva, the more we're in accord with truth and goodness, the more we have, again, peace and happiness. So let's think about this yajna and food here. So yajna, Srila Prabhupada often translates with the English word sacrifice. Yajna is a very difficult word to translate. It generally applies to some kind of ritual where one is connecting with the divine. The reason that that's difficult to translate is that for a lot of people, religious ritual has a negative connotation. So if you say it's a religious ritual, people are going to think, oh, it's just something mechanical, or it's something traditional that people do without knowledge. But yajna doesn't mean sacrifice in the sense of, well, I'm going to give up something that I like and voluntarily have misery. It doesn't mean sacrifice in that way. But it means a giving and a connection. And if we look at how human beings function, we will see that in general, human beings function by finding pleasure in giving. So right now it's Christmas, and at Christmas time in most of the world, at least the Christian-dominated world, there's a lot of gift giving going on. There's like 6 or 7 weeks where people are buying presents to exchange gifts. Now, exchanging gifts is a little problematic because if I buy gifts for, 20 people and my family, friends, coworkers, I can't be sure that they're going to like what I give them. And then I'm going to be receiving gifts probably from the same, 15, 20, 25 people, whatever. And I can't be sure that I'll like what they give me. It's unknown. So one might think that it's a lot more practical and logical and reasonable. So let's say I'm going to spend $500 on Christmas gifts, and I'm going to buy Christmas gifts for, X number of people with that $500. I don't know if they're going to like what I give them, and I don't know what I will receive and if I will receive anything. So wouldn't it make a lot more practical, logical sense for me to use that $500 and buy stuff for myself that I would like? I could even wrap it up and put bows on it and put a card on it to myself. And I'd have all these gifts that I definitely know that I would like. Why don't we do that? Why don't we have a big festival somewhere in the world where people spend, all the stores advertise, we're going to spend, 6 weeks. Everybody buys presents for themselves. And then we have, a big get together where everybody opens all the presents that they bought for themselves. And then we get exactly what we like. But why don't we do that? Why don't we do that? Why with gifts? Why with food? Why do we give to other people? And we have this kind of exchange that goes on. And of course, even in much of the animal kingdom, they're sharing. Right? Something I didn't know until recently was that trees share food underground through their root system. That's one of the reasons why a stump will start growing a new branch with leaves on it. Where did it get that energy? Because the other trees are like, oh, you lost all your leaves. You can't make any food from sunlight anymore. Don't worry, we'll help you out. We'll feed you. So there's this joy we find in giving and exchanging and sharing that far surpasses whatever happiness we get for doing things just for ourselves. And again, from a practical, logical point of view, it may not make sense, but that's what we do. And, practically every retailer is dependent in the modern Western world on this custom. And not only do we share gifts, of course, we share food. And again, cooking for yourself, even if you like to cook and you're a good cook, and even if you like what you eat, is not as much fun as sharing what you cook with others. Yesterday I cooked, and I usually eat with my granddaughter, but she was out of town. So yesterday I cooked something, and I know how to cook it, and I did measure some things. and I liked what I cooked, but I made too much. And so this morning I said to my daughter, I have some left over. Would you like some? And I felt happier sharing some of my food with her than I felt just sitting alone in my room and eating. So why is this? There's a natural happiness. The truth, the reality, goodness, is that the happiness of loving and giving is greater than the happiness of just taking care of myself. Here we have Atma Karna, just trying to please oneself. If we think about people who just try to please themselves, people who are selfish and greedy, the epitome of that person at Christmas time is Charles Dickens' Scrooge, who was just keeping all of his money for himself. He wasn't even properly compensating his employees at Christmas time, even though they were in need. And of course, he wasn't even properly taking care of himself. He was just hoarding his money and counting his money. There's a similar story in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam of a Brahmana who wouldn't share his wealth, even with his family members, and wasn't even using his wealth to take nice care of himself very much. And this kind of person is thoroughly condemned. Even by materialistic people, even people who don't have interest in spiritual life. The person who just, all they do is take care of themselves. They buy fancy cars and fancy clothes and fancy food, but they don't share with anyone. They don't share with family. They don't share with friends. Or sometimes you may see people who externally share. They appear to share, but their mood is selfish. Like, I'm giving something to you, but I'm giving something to you with the calculation that you'll give something back to me. I'm keeping score. And often in a relationship where one is keeping score, one is trying to get a bargain. Just like when we buy things, we're trying to get them on sale. I got this sale card in the mail, and I was immediately, let me see if there's anything I can buy from that store. And I was so disappointed that I couldn't get anything. Well, I'm like, I'm not going to be able to take advantage of the sale, and it's ending today. But I don't care about the retailer. I'd like them to stay in business because I like their store, but I don't, that's selfish. I want them to stay in business because I want to be able to buy things there. Quite honestly, I don't have love for the retailer. I'm not thinking, if I shop on Amazon, I'm not thinking, if I shop on Amazon, then Jeff Bezos can, fly to Mars, and I want to facilitate it. I really just don't care at all. In fact, I'd like it if he used the money for something else. So that kind of relationship is not loving. Right? I'm apparently giving something. I'm giving something to the shop, and I want to get something in return. And I'm trying to get something that's more valuable than what I give. I'm not interested. I'm interested in even giving or uneven in my favor. So that appears like giving, but it's not. Or I may not give anything at all. I may just take care of myself. And this kind of mentality, Krishna is really condemning of. In the 10th canto, chapter 32, when Krishna is explaining to the gopis the different kinds of relationships, he says that one who has just this exchange mentality, that I'm only going to give to you if I get something back. And, I'm trying to get back something more valuable than what I give. He says there's no prema, there's no love going on there. He says there's not even friendship. And he says there's no happiness and there's no dharma. Dharma means what the authentic essence of something. So it's not an authentic relationship. Again, if I'm just dealing with some big store and I'm polite to the cashier and hopefully I'm polite to the people that work there and so forth. And even if I don't steal anything, it's not an authentic, loving relationship. That's not what's going on. The store may have a big sign up, we live to serve our customers are number one. But that's not really true. They're serving the customers so they can make money. And I'm being polite to them so I can get what I want to get. So we have these two different kinds of relationship. One is where there's genuine giving, and I'm giving for the joy of giving. I'm giving for the joy of giving. I give, and then I let go of any attachment to the result. I give just to give. The feeling of happiness in giving. And then the other is where I'm atmakarnat, I'm just thinking about myself. Even my apparent giving is calculated and selfish. Now, this mentality of whether or not we're giving, whether or not we take joy in giving, or whether or not we're selfish, is particularly evident in how we deal with our physical necessities of life, things like food and shelter. Why? Because obviously we have kind of a hardwired system for physical preservation of life. It's like there's living entities are pre-programmed to survive. And therefore you notice that we might be generally pleasant persons, but if we're hungry or thirsty or tired or ill, we may not be quite so pleasant. And such a phenomena exists even with Maharaj Parikshit, where when he was hungry, thirsty, and tired, he became unpleasant. And he was very rude and actually offensive to a great sage in his mood of being hungry, thirsty, and tired. So when our own physiological necessities are screaming at us, we tend to become very self-absorbed. Now, you could see that there's some good reason for that on a biological level. I mean, on a biological level, if I'm always thinking about others, even if I'm very hungry, tired, thirsty, or sick, then I may die, or I may become incapacitated in some way. And so become more self-absorbed in the presence of hunger, thirst, exhaustion, or illness may be good for self-preservation. However, we are more than the body. We are ultimately a soul. Actually, we do not die. And we do not actually die. We do not get sick. We do not get injured. Part of the process of realizing that we're not dependent on the material circumstances for our happiness or even our identity or survival is to develop some detachment and compassion, even in the face of strong physiological urges. And therefore, you'll see that in every genuine religion in the world, there is some austerity in relationship to food. So I know in the Christian tradition, they have, at least among the Catholics, they have some time of the year like Lent where you don't eat certain foods, or some Catholics don't eat certain foods on Fridays. The Muslims, they have certain foods they never eat, and then they fast for a month once a year during the daytime. The Jewish people have certain foods they don't eat, and they have a fast day. And of course, among the followers of the Vedas, people who call themselves Hindus or any branch like that, there's fast days, there's foods that are never eaten, then there's days at which only certain kinds of foods can be eaten, and so forth. And we also find that in the Bhagavatam, when one becomes a renunciate, a lot of the regulations have to do with food. Like the beginning level renunciate can eat food brought from home, from their family can bring them food from outside the village. The next level can beg from door to door, and so forth. We have Madhavendra Puri, who didn't beg at all. So he never asked anyone for food. If somebody voluntarily gave him food, he would accept if it was proper food. And if nobody voluntarily gave him food, then he would fast. So this kind of renunciation having to do with food, or what kind of food you can get and where you can get it and how you can get it. In our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, we have the story of Raghunath Das Goswami, who became a renunciate. And his renunciation gradually increased, again, particularly in this area of food. So if we really want to have some measure of to what extent we are operating in terms of universal law, that giving is pleasure and giving with love is pleasure, we can particularly look at how we deal with food. Do we give food? Do we share food? Now, we've been talking so far about ordinary life and how we deal with other people or perhaps animals as well. Do we share food with animals? And again, in civilized societies, people are expected to share their food. They're expected to share their food at least with family members. People are expected to share food with those who are less fortunate than themselves. And the Vedas talk about sharing food with the animals around your domicile. And even going outside before every meal and saying, if anyone's hungry, come and eat. If anyone's hungry, come and eat. If anyone's hungry, come and eat. I don't know if you should do that on a busy city street. You don't know what kind of person would come into your house. But this kind of principle is there. However, we find on the material level that although there's far more joy in giving exchanges of love without considering questions of return, that if we just stay on the material level, it's not completely satisfying. Others may be disappointed in what we give, or we may have some underlying expectations, which then get violated. And, there's some sort of assumption that if I just give without any consideration, that I'll also be taken care of, which may not work. Family members may betray you, friends may betray you, your employer may fire you, so many things can happen in this world. But this urge to give is ultimately applied when we give to the Supreme, when we give to the Divine, when we give to Krishna. Then it finds its perfection. Now, of course, a person may say, well, why should I give food to Krishna? Is he hungry? Later in the Gita, when Krishna talks about specifically what kind of food he wants, right? Patram pushpam pulam toyam yo me bhakta prachiti tadaham bhakti paritam ashnami praitatmana. Srila Prabhupada comments that people who don't understand that God is a person, they read that verse and say, oh, Krishna is just an ordinary human being who gets hungry for leaves and flowers and fruit. They can't understand it. So we can say, how can God be hungry? He's the one who's producing all the food, or you could even say, by the expansion of his energy, he is all the food. What does this mean? But it's an exchange of love. It's an exchange of love. Even in our ordinary life, we give back to people what they give to us. When I was a little child, my father, who's passed away many years ago, his birthday was on Christmas Eve. So we were always birthday shopping for him while everyone else was Christmas shopping. And, I would get some money every week, a little allowance from my parents. So then my mother would, my parents gave me that money. And then my mother would take me out shopping and she would help me pick out a gift for my father, usually a tie. And, I would give the gift to my father and he would be very happy. At least he would pretend to be very happy. I don't know actually how happy he was with the ties that I gave him. And I felt very satisfied. Why? Because there's an exchange. Or one of my godbrothers told me the story that when one of his sons was 6 years old, his son walked up to him with a stick outside and said, Daddy, here's a stick. And the father felt this overpouring of love for his son, not because he needed a stick or wanted a stick, but because there was this exchange. There was exchange of love. So this is the natural thing. When someone gives something to us, even if they're giving back to us what we gave to them. You with little children, I was spending some extra time with my great-grandsons the last few days. And, you buy the toys for them, you give them the toys, and then they give the toys to you. And here, Grandma, you can have this toy to play with. And there's this, your heart is melted that there's this exchange. So Krishna is also like that. Krishna is a living being. He's a supreme living being. So he has supplied us with all of the food. And when we share with him what we cook, we give to him, he feels very happy. And then he again gives back to us. Like again, you're at the table with young children and you give them something to eat. And they may take from their plate and they give you some of it. And then again, you take and you give back to them. Or if you think at weddings, they often have this thing where the bride and groom are feeding each other cake. Right? You've all seen that. They're putting cake in each other's mouth at the same time. So it's love. Now, this is a common way of showing love. I share my food with you. You take that food and you share with me. I share back with you. Or recently, I was visiting the youngest son, and there were some other devotees in the area. So we all met up at one devotee's restaurant. And we ordered some preparations that we shared. Okay, let's order a whole tray of sweet potato fries. Let's order a whole tray of nachos. And everybody will take some of it. And then someone says, oh, what did you get? Can I have some of that? And oh, sure, you can have some. So this is, and of course, Rukmini was singing this like Mais Boga Artik song about how the cowherd boys in Madhumangal, they're doing this. They're taking food and they're sharing food. So this concept that we can do this with God, that we can share with God. We can share our food with him. And of course, every religious system has some way of connecting with God in relation to food. There's some blessing before you eat, some acknowledgement. But we go further than that, we actually share it with him. When I was brought up in the Jewish tradition, and we had not every time we ate, but at least on the Sabbath, we would have this bread and we'd cover it with a beautiful embroidered cloth. And before eating, it was on a silver platter. And before eating, we would take the cloth off and hold the silver platter up in the air and say a prayer. And then we would break off pieces of the bread and we would distribute it. And later, when I joined the Hare Krishna movement, I thought, oh, that was prasadam. We were trying to offer something to God and distribute it. So this starts with, as they say, an attitude of gratitude that Krishna has provided us so much wonderful food. I mean, Krishna's definitely provided us with far more food than is necessary just to maintain life or just to maintain a healthy life. We think about, how many different kinds of fruits there are. So many, you go to a typical grocery store, supermarket in the United States, and there's so many different kinds of fruit. And then there's kinds, of course. There's, so many kinds of apples, so many kinds of course, we don't have so many kinds of bananas in most of our supermarkets. We usually just have the Cavendish, but so many different kinds of oranges, so many different kinds of apples, so many different kinds of lettuce, and so forth. So many kinds of kinds. If you want to get beans, there's, oh my goodness, there's so many dozens of different kinds of beans. And again, we don't require that for life and health to have so many varieties. But Krishna has provided that out of his infinite kindness. And so when we're growing our own food, which is ideal, of course, or if we're working and we're shopping for food, or we're going to a farm where food is being grown, I mean, we can do that with gratitude, with a consciousness that this is a gift from God. I mean, it's actually amazing. And not only is it a gift from God, but just the whole process of food is an amazing gift from God. If we think that all the food that anyone eats, even the non-vegetarians, everyone is eating food that is simply sunlight, water, and earth minerals. That's it. And then Krishna says he's the light of the moon that gives flavor to the different foods, and he's the fragrance of the earth, so that a carrot tastes different from a parsnip, and a potato tastes different from a turnip, which tastes different from a sweet potato, and then again, the varieties of potatoes the white potato tastes different from a yellow potato. And all of that is done. I mean, what an incredible chemist. Our Garbhadra Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj used to say how God is a chemist. And what a chemist he is. He's taking sunlight, water, and dirt and turning it into sweet potatoes and carrots and tomatoes and of so many varieties and so many variations of taste. Yes. Unbelievable. And then, of course, he's the fire of digestion. Krishna says he joins with the air of life, incoming and outgoing, to digest our food. So digestion, of course, means moving the food from the mouth to the esophagus. And then there's a little valve there, and then into the stomach. And then there's another valve into the small intestine, into the large intestine, into the small intestine. Then it's going out in the bloodstream. And he's the air of life, moving the food around. So, I eat an apple, and then the apple turns into fingernails. Pretty good trick. You feed an apple to a cow, it turns into milk, and then you take the milk and you can turn it into cheese. and to have this sort of meditation and appreciation, and then we can use our ability, which also Krishna says, I am the ability in a person. We can use our ability, our intelligence. We can read Yamuna's cookbook that Rukmini was reading from earlier. And I can follow the recipes with or without measuring equipment. And I can use my intelligence and my ability. You know, I used to make this rice from Yamuna's cookbook. Very complicated. It would take me 4 hours to make this rice because you had to soak eggplant in turmeric and salt, and then you had to dry roast spices, and then you had to grind them, which generally means you need to have electric spice grinder unless you really wanted to get good biceps with pounding your spices. And it was a very complicated recipe, but it was incredible. Actually, unbelievably incredible. So that's, you know, our intelligence, our ability, that's Krishna. What we're using to cook the food, the heat and fire, that Krishna says, I am the heat and fire. And the heat and fire takes of course, the heat and fire is coming originally from the sun. Whatever we're burning wood, we're burning propane or even electricity. Ultimately, that comes from the sun. And then by burning it with this heat and fire, the molecules start to dance and things change, and the structure of the food changes. And we're actually kind of pre-digesting our food to some extent by cooking it. And all of these things. Now, if I'm meditating on all of these areas that are Krishna's, Krishna says, I am the light of the sun. I send forth the rain. I am the fragrance of the earth. I am the moonshine. I am your ability. I join with the air of life to digest your food. I am the fire of digestion. I am the heat and fire. All that's Krishna. Well, wouldn't I want to take everything that Krishna's given me and share it with him? Well, it's his anyway. But that's part of my acknowledgement. Hey, this is yours. In one sense, it's like, you know, if I hire someone to build a piece of furniture for me, say I hire someone to build me a desk. So I'm providing the money for the materials. I may even provide the materials directly. I'm saying what I want. I'm paying the person a salary. And when they make the desk, what do they do with it? They give it to me. They don't say, well, I made the desk. It's mine. They give it to me. So we're taking these things that Krishna has given us, and everything we're using is Krishna. And then we're saying, hey, this is yours. Now that's scary for a materialistic person because, like, wait a minute, if I give Krishna everything, all the food that I've grown and prepared and cooked, what will be left for me? But, you know, I think we should have some faith that if Krishna has given me everything in the first place, that he's also going to share. So whatever I give with Krishna, he also shares. And he also gives to me. And at least in my experience, I find that Krishna, for most people, most of the time, gives us more even than we can deal with. Prabhupada said that Krishna has 10 hands, figuratively, in that if he wants to take things away, you can't hold on to them. And if he wants to give, it's hard to accept all of that. So most of us, even if we don't consider ourselves wealthy, but I would assume most of us here in this class have access to more food than we can eat. We probably have access to more clothes than we can wear. You know, I definitely have access to more books than I can read. So Krishna gives us an abundance. And then we can also give back without fear. I mean, if we can do that for family and friends, right? We do that, isn't it? For our family and friends, we'll often give them everything. Here, everything. Oh, we just don't worry about it. So one, and of course, that sometimes we should worry about it. But with Krishna, we don't need to. If I give everything to him, he's already giving everything to me. Now, there's also this incredible process that takes place when I have this ceremony of connections, yajna, of giving Krishna all of my food. And that is that Krishna eats it. Now, Krishna doesn't have to eat it in a digestive sense. It's not that Krishna has, you know, lungs and heart and stomach and intestines and veins and some chemical process going on of eating like I do in this physical body. But he definitely eats it, and he definitely enjoys it, and he definitely relishes it. Of course, mostly what he's relishing again is the love. Just like, my friend relished the love of his little boy giving him a stick. Or I relish the love of my great-grandson giving me a little plastic toy. It's mostly what Krishna is relishing is the love. But he is relishing it. He is enjoying it. And in his process of enjoying it and his process of tasting it, his own mood enthuses the food that he's eaten. And therefore we find Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's Krishna acting in the role of a devotee. There is an incident where he was eating some food that had been offered to Krishna. And he said, we all know what ingredients have gone here. I don't think Jamuna's recipe book was extant at that time, but maybe there was somebody who had a recipe book. And so he could look up what were the ingredients in the food. And he said, so we all know what ingredients have gone here, or if you're really good at cooking, you can often tell just by tasting something what's in it. Yeah. People who do like restaurant reviews, they have all kinds of terminology that I don't even know, and where they're able to say, oh, okay, we can tell there's this spice and this like that. So we know, but there's some flavor here we can't identify according to the ingredient list. You look in the cookbook, it's not there. What does that taste? That's not listed. So I tell this story a lot. I was in Puerto Rico many years ago. And in the morning, I was in the temple kitchen. I was cooking the main meal for the devotees, sabji dal, rice, chapatis, nectar, halva, salad for like 40 devotees. I was very busy in the kitchen. And that evening was going to be a program at the local university. So another devotee was in there making cookies. Or any of you who are in the UK, that's biscuits. So she was having a very, very simple recipe. I know how she made these cookies because I was observing her during the cooking time.
She lives here.
What?
She lives here. She's not on the Zoom, but
Kamagiri. Oh, all right. Well, Kamagiri, if you hear this later, yes, that was you. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember watching you make those cookies, and they had butter, sugar, flour, vanilla, maybe vanilla, and some baking powder. That was it. They were like super simple cookies. If you want to take the most basic cookie recipe you could possibly take, it would be that, butter, sugar, flour, and baking powder. I saw her bake. So that night we went to the program. I'm trying to remember how many people were there. About 120 to 150 people were there. And after my talk, they were giving out the cookies and giving out some of Prabhupada's books. People were coming up to me and asking me questions, so I didn't get a chance to eat any cookie. But in the process of, they were all gone by the time I finished answering questions, at least 40 people came up to me and said, do you have the recipe for those cookies? And I thought, if I give you that recipe, you'll be very disappointed. I said, I've never had anything like that. I had this experience with one of my sisters-in-law that she said, Urmila, whenever you visit, you make rice, and I've followed your recipe for the rice, and it somehow doesn't taste the same way you make it. Or I heard the story from some devotees that were out traveling on book distribution, and they stopped at a gas station, petrol station, and this one woman ran out of the shop that was in connection with the station, and she said, are you Hare Krishnas? Do you have any of those little white bowls? I had one 5 years ago, and I've been trying to find you guys ever since. So there is something incredible in the prasada. There's something, prasada means mercy. There's something incredible in the food that we've offered to Krishna, because after we offer the food to Krishna, after we share with Krishna, we then again share with others. So this principle of sharing food with others is not negated when we share our food with God, but we share our food with Krishna and then with others. And people will say, what is this taste? And Mahaprabhu, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, said, this is the taste of God. This is what God tastes like. Now, in one sense, you could say that's true of all food, because again, Krishna says, I am the sun. I am the fragrance of the earth. I am the light of the moon. I am the heat and fire. So in one sense, anything you eat, even if you don't offer to Krishna, you're tasting something of what God tastes like. But when we offer our food directly to Krishna, it's very personal. What does Bhagavan, Krishna, what is the supreme personality, Prabhupada used this word, this term. What is the Supreme Personality of Godhead? What does he taste like? And what happens when we eat food which has been offered to God, which we call again his mercy or his prasadam, is that incredible flavor awakens within us an understanding that real happiness is giving. Real happiness is not atmakarna. Real happiness is not just thinking about myself to the detriment of others. But real happiness is in love and giving and sharing on the ultimate level with the divine. That's the mood that awakens in us. And therefore, even someone who doesn't know that the food has been offered to God, even someone who's not on any kind of spiritual path, even someone who's not even interested in anything spiritual, when they eat food that's been offered to Krishna, they have some extraordinary experience and extraordinary purification. Now, those of us who have this regular habit, Prabhupada says in another purport in the Bhagavad Gita, that those who are habituated to this practice are called devotees of the Lord. Again, we go back to this Santa. So those of us who live like this, actually everything, Yat Karoshi, Yat Ignashi, Yat Chahosi, Dasi, Yat Tapasi, Sikante, Yat Tat Kurushva, Madakunam. And we do everything as an offering to Krishna. Whatever we're doing, our thoughts, our feelings, our actions, everything. Well, this is for your pleasure. 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 But certainly we can start with food. It's a very simple thing. Doesn't require, you can just have a shelf or a part of a shelf. You put up a picture of Krishna and you offer vegetarian food, no meat, fish, and eggs. We also don't use onions or garlic. And as Rukmini said earlier, we don't taste the food before cooking, before offering it. We don't taste it while we're cooking. And then we can just have a little special plate that's Krishna's plate and put it before him. And you can just say, Krishna, please accept this food, or chant the Hare Krishna mantra. And if you want to go further than that, there's Sanskrit mantras you can learn and processes and so forth for worship. You can take it up to a very sophisticated level in terms of the process for offering food and have leaves from the tulsi plant and so forth. But the concept of just, here's God and I'm going to offer my food to God. And to do it with love, not mechanically, not as a ritual. And then Prabhupada relates the doing of this to so many other kinds of ceremonies of connection, hearing about Krishna, chanting about Krishna, and of course, remembering Krishna, that these are all different kinds of yagyas, all different ways of connection. And of course, we Hare Krishna devotees are famous for chanting about Krishna and giving people food offered to Krishna. This is what we're known for. So when we met Srila Prabhupada in 1974, my father asked Srila Prabhupada, he said, I noticed that you're very eager to give people your food, even people who don't know anything about your philosophy. Why is that? He said, I'm in the food business and I'm curious as to why you do this. And Prabhupada was in a very relaxed, casual mood. And he kind of leaned back and he was smiling, like ear to ear, smiling. Prabhupada said, it was like sitting like this. And he said, do you believe in infection? So my father said, yes. Prabhupada said, just like if you eat the food of a sick person, you will get infected with their disease. So if you eat the food that Krishna has eaten, you will be infected with Krishna's disease. So, of course, Prabhupada was speaking metaphorically. In other words, you'll awaken your eternal nature of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. You awaken your spiritual nature. And even if it just awakens a little bit, it's such an astonishing thing in the taking of prasadam. And Prabhupada said, if we become santas like this, if we live our life in accord with the truth, with reality, with goodness, that the real happiness in life is loving and giving. And then he said, there will be peace and happiness in the world. So I'm not sure exactly how much time you have for questions or how you work that on Zoom. If there's any questions or discussions.
Thank you, Urmila Prabhu. Thank you very much. So devotees, now either you can type your questions in the chat or you can ask yourself, unmuting yourself.
Do you also have people watching on YouTube and like that, and people comment someplace where that you can also
Yeah.
get
So I see. Yeah, there's also a few watching in YouTube. I'll look for comments. If somebody type it, I can ask that.
Very good. Rukmini, yes.
Yes, thank you for that wonderful class. And something you said, there seems to be some kind of echo. Is it okay? You can hear me properly?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It's a little staticky in the background, but we can hear you.
Okay. So, yes, thank you for that class. And something you said earlier when you were talking about the different kinds of relationship, the relationship of give and take where one is keeping score versus the relationship of authentic love. That reminded me, in connection with this whole thing of food, that the whole development of economics was originally about meeting people's biophysical needs. And it was originally about, people have a need to eat food every day. How will that happen, that everyone will get the food that they need every day, especially when there's winter, so there's a long period when you can't grow any food. And in the 19th century, people developed, intellectuals developed a kind of economics, and they developed a whole economic way of thinking in order to deal with this, where it is actually based on one's selfish desire, or each person for themselves. And it's almost literally, Krishna says in the 16th chapter, Kim anyat kama hoitukam. So kama, there's nothing else, but you could translate kama as selfish desire, basically. There's nothing other than selfish desire. So people who have developed that economic way of thinking, they first developed it about food, and then they became rather imperialistic. So they started extending it to many other things, and people have written entire books about applying the economic way of thinking to a relationship, in specifically a marriage relationship even. So, one of the closest relationships. And they analyze that in terms of, so they don't recognize, it's fortunately still unusual, but they say that this principle of giving selflessly, they say that it's not actually in practice, and that each person is actually trying to seek a bargain in their relationship and trying to get more than they give. And they say so whenever one is doing that, then there's techniques for negotiation, there's techniques for bargaining, and so then they say, oh, you can apply all these principles to your relationship. So what is friendship? What is love? What are loving relationships? It's actually, so it hasn't. Fortunately, it hasn't spread to society in general, but it is, it is a way of thought that exists in the world, and that people write books. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's definitely schools of thought that all we can ever be is transactional. The gopis give 3 categories. They give a category of transactional, loving, and ungrateful. Krishna expands that into 9 categories. And Krishna, the most categories are in the ungrateful one, where Krishna has a big expansion of different kinds of ungrateful, and different kinds of basically karma, different kinds of self, really gross selfishness that people give to you and you don't even give back. But he does have 2 categories of selfless giving. One is the pure devotee, and one is family, particularly parents. And he calls this the beautiful middle category. Figuratively, it's compared to the beautiful waists of the gopis, this middle category of love. So God himself does say that there is such a thing as real love. Now, on the spiritual platform, real love is there because the person realizes that I already have everything that I need. And therefore, there's no reason to be transactional. There's no reason to keep score. There's no reason to have a merchant mentality, because I'm in touch with the Supreme, who's unlimited. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purna Purnadujachate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vasishate. If you have infinity minus infinity, you still have infinity. And so therefore, being in touch with the infinite, I what is my need? Why do I have to be calculating? You know, and Krishna says, Yoga Kshema Vahamyahama, I'm taking care of you. So near Yoga Kshema Atmavan. This is also interesting. Don't worry about gain and safety. Be established in the real Atma, not Atma Karanat here as materially selfish, but be established in the real self. So he talks about those kind of devotees, and that can't be falsely imitated, because a person who actually has a transactional mentality, if they try to imitate being a saintly person, eventually they'll explode. That's what I see. You know, that secretly they're keeping score. So they're pretending not to keep score. They're pretending not to keep score. They're pretending not to keep score. And then when the other person or persons don't reciprocate the way that they want, then they have kind of like an earthquake, you know, the tensions building up on the fault line, and eventually, you know, the buildings fall into a crack in the highway. But then Krishna does give the example that even among materialistic people, there is a good semblance of this within a family, and especially parents. So it's well known that, I mean, there are bad parents, and there are abusive parents, and there are selfish parents, and there are irresponsible parents. And as Kali Yuga progresses, there seem to be more and more and more of such parents. But in general, good parents will sacrifice for their children without thinking transactionally. I mean, it was interesting to me the other day. My granddaughter took her husband on a trip for his birthday. So they went out of town for a few days. And my daughter and I were watching their two young children. So as they were leaving, my grandson-in-law says to me, "Do you have a TSA compliant lock for my check-in baggage?" So I said, "Yeah." And I said, "I'll lend it to you." So I went back to my place. I got the lock, and he looked at it. He said, "It won't work. The shank is too small for the suitcase." So meanwhile, it's getting time for them to go to the airport. So I look up for them where they could purchase a TSA compliant lock on their way to the airport. And I started thinking, I wonder if they're going to have time to pick one up and still make their flight. And I said, well, I can drive over to Walmart and get one and drive back. It's about a 15-minute drive each way. And my granddaughter, I just said it without even thinking about it. And my granddaughter looked at me and she said, "You'd be willing to do that?" And when she said that, I thought, I guess I actually offered something rather extraordinary. I mean, I didn't end up having to do that. They had enough time. They were able to pick up something themselves on their way. But that tendency to just offer something to children, or in this case, to grandchildren, it's so much a part of us that it wasn't something that I thought about at all. It's I'll get that. I can go and get that for you. And again, she was like, "Really? You would do that?" I'm like, "Yeah." I thought, actually, that's a lot less than what I'll be doing to take care of your kids while you're. So it's like that among family. Again, there are abusive parents and there are dysfunctional families, and that seems to be increasing in the world. And there are people who calculate keeping score even in families and so forth. But we get some idea of that within a family, some concept of that. And human society has that as an ideal. I mean, one logical, reasonable argument one can make against the people who say, well, just cynically, where we're all just transactional and there's no real love, is that, well, why do we even have that as an ideal? Where does that come from? If we were simply conniving, calculating beings, why would, I'll guess every culture in history, perhaps as an exception, have this as an ideal? Why do we glorify it? Why do we get teary-eyed over the, 80-year-old couple who's still dancing together in love after so many years and, sits at each other's bedside when they're in the hospital? Why does that move us? Why
So
are we cynics,
There's unfortunately this philosophy called objectivism, which said that this this idea has come about from people who are weak in order to take advantage of people who are strong. They try, it's their calculation in order to exploit the strong and hold them down.
All right. Well, I have a question about why something is so universal. We're looking then at, and I'm not sure how much this will interest all of our audience, but we're looking then at theories of sociology. And I would guess that most of you have heard about critical race theory, although we may not know what that is. But in sociology, critical theory, whether it's about race, class, or gender, has the assumption that human society is based on exploitation, that the strong will exploit the weak, whether the stronger is in terms of gender, class, or race, or some other factor. And all of human society and all of human interaction is interpreted through that lens. Of course, the communist concept is like this, that they have a critical class theory. It's also called conflict theory. So critical theory or conflict theory. I don't know why people are up in arms about it being taught in elementary school, because it's not usually taught until a graduate level. And it's taught as one way of looking at the world, not as the way of looking at the world. And then there's also what we call functionalism, which is that society is designed for cooperation, that society is designed for people to be cooperative and have give and take. So it is true that that's a particular worldview, that it's, just a dog eat dog and all of us are simply out to exploit everyone else. But there's a lot of strong evidence for cooperation in nature as well as competition. It's true one living entity is food for another, but there's also a lot of cooperation in nature. Certainly among members of the same species, cooperation is there. Cooperation without calculation is there, even among animal species, even among trees. Sometimes cooperation for the sake of the whole with great sacrifice, like bees that die for the benefit of the hive. But another piece of evidence is, like Robert says, your peace and happiness. If we take this cynical perspective and we say that there's nothing beyond competition, selfish competition, and selfish calculation, and scorekeeping, and trying to get an advantage for myself, and everything else is just an illusion, and everything else is just there. Some big exploiter is creating this illusion of love and harmony so that they can exploit you better and sell you more things at Christmas, because they know you'll buy a lot more things at Christmas if you're going to buy them as gifts than if you're going to buy them for yourself. And it's interesting that they know that that's true, that they have that thing that they can exploit. And why do they have that thing that they can exploit? Because there must be something internally to us. But we can also say, what is the result? Krishna says, if we have a merchant exploitive mentality, there's no love, there's no friendship, there's no authenticity, and there's no happiness. So on a subjective level, we can see if I have calculated relationships with people, am I happy? Do I feel there's authenticity? Do I feel secure? And when I have relationships of giving without calculation, am I happy? I mean, I think we can also, subjectivity matters. If a cynical, critical theory or conflict theory, I might be able to explain it objectively, although I still would wonder, where does the tendency come from that can be exploited? You're exploiting something. You're exploiting some inner urge for selfless love. Where does that come from? That you can even take advantage of it and exploit it. But even if you want to go beyond just pure objectivity, how do I feel? And I can tell you frankly that whenever I'm in a mood of keeping score in transactions, I'm not happy. I'm fearful. I'm, always thinking about protecting myself. I'm always analyzing the other person's behavior because I'm trying to get something from them at their expense. Then I'm always assuming that they're trying to get something from me at my expense. So I'm analyzing all their behavior as being exploitive in a mood to protect myself. So I'm just in this fearful protective mode. I'm in this stress mode. I mean, even biochemically, being in that mode is going to, release cortisol and so forth. And being in that mode is actually going to make me sick if I stay there all the time. It's going to literally depress my immune system, depress my digestive system. Whereas if I'm in a mood that my real happiness comes from giving, and my real happiness comes from the joy of giving, and that I trust that God is taking care of me, I will literally have better physical health. So all these things, they indicate that there's both strong subjective and objective reasons to believe that we are designed for love and giving, and that we're not designed for this cynical, well, everybody's just an exploiter anyway mentality. But thank you for bringing that up. I hope I didn't spend too long on that. Is any other question that anybody else has?
Anybody has questions? If not, I have a question.
Okay.
See, Mataji, we know there's a 3 modes of material nature: Rajaguna, Sattva, Tamaguna, mode of ignorance, passion, and goodness. And then pertaining to the prasadam, and the people who makes, they're also in the 3 modes of material nature. The ingredients, they're also mode of ignorance. The process in which they're also mode of ignorance. So the combination of all these things, now we offer the prasad. And then once it's offered, hopefully Krishna tastes, it's a transcendental. So now, once it's a transcendental, that means it's beyond the modes of material nature. It doesn't matter who offered, what they offered, how they did it.
Well, Krishna is not a mechanical process. It's not like, this is one reason that I understand that Prabhupada didn't use the word ritual for yajna. Because, if you use the word ritual, then it sounds like that. It sounds like Krishna is just our kind of sin eradicating machine. That I have this food, I don't want to eat sin, and so I'm just going to mechanically offer it to Krishna. Okay, that's better than nothing. Like maybe some days the man really doesn't feel much love for his wife, but he still goes to work. Or he still says, hi, dear, when he comes home, even though he really isn't into it that day. So, that's worth something. That is worth something. It's not worth nothing. Some days the parents might feel, why did I ever have kids? These kids are driving me nuts. They still feed them, and they still bathe them and put them to bed and so forth. But that shouldn't be the normal situation. We should be offering food to Krishna with love. It shouldn't be in the mode of ignorance. It shouldn't actually even be in the mode of goodness. It should be with love. And it's not that hard. Just a few moments of meditation that this food is sunlight, water, and dirt. Wow, look at that. Here's rice, and here's beans, and here's carrots, and here's basil. It's just sunlight, water, and dirt, which are all Krishna. It's all Krishna. Wow, and Krishna's the heat of fire. How can you not have some affection and gratitude if you meditate like that? How long did that take me? 5 seconds? It's not like you have to go, into some deep meditative trance and do some long ritual that takes you hours and hours and hours. And it's all have to be very careful that you have to do everything just right. You can do that. I mean, that's also there if you want to. But it can be very simple. It can be just as simple as, you give a child something to eat, and the child takes it and takes the cookie and gives you a piece of it.
Thank you. So that was my second part of the question, where, of course, what you explained very nicely. So it's not what everything is offered to Krishna as prasada, or Krishna accepts.
Well, I don't like going down that road. That's a tricky road to go down. So I think that our assumption, our practical assumption in the Hare Krishna movement is that anyone who's followed the mechanical procedure has offered to Krishna and his prasadam. But as far as our own practice, we should really offer with love. And, it does matter who cooks. Ultimately, it matters even who grows the food. I mean, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur talks about food in the mode of goodness, that's grown purely, it's harvested purely, it's transported purely. So that might not be an option to us in 2021. We don't all have our own garden. If we do, like Rukmini was saying, there may be a problem in the winter and so forth. But we should try ourselves to offer with devotion. And as far as possible, we should try to eat food that's been offered by people who are devotees. Not just ostensibly devotees, but who's offered with devotion. But that doesn't mean we should go around saying, well, I think you're in the mode of ignorance. I don't want to eat your cooking. That wouldn't be very productive. I did spend some time many years ago in a temple where, anyway, you brought it up, so you're going to be responsible. So I did spend some time many years ago in a temple where the cook had one of the cooks had a predilection towards physical violence. And he had been banned from the temple property at least 4 times. At that temple, he had been banned from many other temples in North America because of his inclination to violence. And why the temple authorities let him cook for the deities is still something that I do not understand on any level. He was also not particularly clean. And it was a phenomena that people would eat what he cooked and then they would at least argue. There was that definitely happened. That when you ate his cooking, that it would affect your subtle being in a negative way. So Lord Kapila Dev does say that bhakti can be performed in the modes of nature, that a person can perform bhakti in the mode of ignorance or in the mode of passion or in the mode of goodness. And ideally, the people that we have cook for the deities in the temple should be persons who are doing their best to actually have love and devotion and not just working mechanically. But ultimately, the people we should be responsible for is ourselves. And how am I cooking? How am I preparing? What is my mood in cooking? And not just I'm offering food, as a mechanical ritual.
Thank you.
Is that all right?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Because you addressed my question. Thank you.
Yeah, and we the other way too. I've eaten food that was obviously cooked with a lot of devotion, and that was very apparent in the person. I mean, even materially, that's apparent. If you go to your mother's house and she's cooking something for you with love.
Yeah. And
there's a different taste than you eat, something from a shop where all the person cared about was making money. So experience that even materially. Okay, we have, says USA, Columbus, Ujjwala, but I don't see the rest of it.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Sorry, this is a one Zoom with Hare Krishna. This is a one Zoom with everybody there for, because just now we have home visit, so we have to tell which zone we are in. Was there? Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. We didn't change that, Mata, sorry. Therefore, you have to read all this.
It's fine. I see now your full name when I spotlight you. I see Ujjwala Nitai Diptiman.
Yeah, my son.
Safka. That's a long name. Okay.
So, Mata, my question is that thank you talking about the prasad distribution. So, Mata, whenever anybody come to our house, even the worker or anybody, we always try to make sure he gets some prasad, anything, So some take so nicely, and sometimes somebody gets shocked, as soon as, if he, first time he come, then when he going, we are asking that, would you like some food or water, and then try to give. So I don't know what to tell them, but sometimes I tell, this is our culture. If anybody come home, we make sure he gets, a nice word. So how to tell them? Sometimes they don't. Some people don't understand that.
You're never going to please everybody. Just accept you're never going to please everybody. But I also do that, and I say, we always offer people some food. It may help to have something to offer that looks just store-bought or normal to them. So like I have a supply of dried fruits that I offer to the Lord. So that's, just dried apricots and dried pineapples and things like that. Whereas if I had cooked or prepared things, some people would be hesitant to eat something that's cooked. They may not know what the ingredients are, or they may not know your cleanliness standards, or they may just have some hesitancy to take cooked food from a stranger. But if it's something, like Srila Prabhupada in the early days gave out apples, for example. So that kind of thing, people are much more likely, in my experience, to take.
Okay. And Mata, my kids, they like so much, like not only my kids, we all like my family, prasad distribution, book distribution, these two things we like so much. So Mataji, please bless us so that we can do proper mood, to please Guru, Krishna, devotee. That is the main thing.
All blessings, but may you have proper mood. But only, I also want to have proper mood. So then I have to ask for blessings also.
Please come to our house when you come to Columbus. One time you came, and after this COVID-19, everything gets stuck.
I haven't been going anywhere except over the internet. So, but thank you very much for having me here. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your inviting me. I actually need to go now because I need to go to a program where it's a housewarming and the devotees want to distribute prasadam. So
Thank you very much.
thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much.
Hare Krishna.